Hello and welcome to the Hannah Hundel Show. I'm your host, Hannah Hundel, and the Hannah Hundel Show is brought to you from the studios of Harvard Radio Broadcasting. Here on the Hannah Hundel Show, we feature the world's foremost experts for groundbreaking discussion within their respective fields, spanning medicine, science, technology, business, politics, policy, law, and more. Join me, your host, Hannah Hundel, on a mission to unpack and understand how contemporary high-impact issues are being tackled by the world's most influential leaders. For today's episode, I'm honored to say that I had the opportunity to sit down with our esteemed guest, Bill Gates. Bill Gates is the co-founder of the Microsoft Corporation and the co-founder of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the world's largest private foundation with the mission of decreasing inequities with regard to education and healthcare and promoting global development and growth. Each year, Bill and Melinda Gates release an annual letter reflecting on their humanitarian work of the past year and offering insight into where they'll be directing their energy and efforts for the upcoming year. The 2019 annual letter, titled "We Didn't See This Coming," is available in full on www.gatesletter.com and describes 9 things that most surprised Bill and Melinda this year. I'm honored now to share part 1 of the conversation between Bill and I about these surprises and the contents of the 2019 annual letter. I want to begin by talking about your commitment to global health. It's something you touched a lot on in the letter, and you've been very vocal about it too. You wrote in the letter that right now it's, quote, a crucial time in global health. And you call on governments in 2019 to put funding toward global health initiatives. And I wonder if you can elaborate on why right now in particular, this moment you believe is such a critical juncture for global health.
Well, the amazing thing is that big commitments were made starting about 20 years ago, both to say that HIV medicine should get out to everyone in the world, and getting the cost down to like $100 a year, and that vaccines that should get to all the children of the world. So Global Fund was created for HIV, also works on malaria and tuberculosis. Yeah. And Gavi is the acronym for the Global Alliance for Vaccines. It was created to get all the vaccines out to even children in poor countries. Those 2 organizations have been very successful. And it's about $100 billion has been spent on global health. Our foundation is a bit more than $10 billion of that, but the rest of it is almost entirely from the 7 or 8 governments. The U.S. being by far the biggest. Then you have Germany and the UK. Well, all those countries, you have a little bit of turning inwards. That hey, do we really care about alliances or other countries? Have the elites who care about these things taken resources that maybe should be kept domestically? And so people are questioning it, particularly if they hear a story that maybe some part of it didn't get used effectively, which it's a very small percentage, but that can happen. And so in the face of all that, a little bit of cynicism, a little bit of questioning of priorities, saying to people, hey, we've been super, super successful. Honestly, these numbers are incredible in terms of lives saved. And we need to keep doing that. If we back off now, the epidemic will really get bad because the susceptible age ranges in Africa, you have so much population growth that it could really spread back. And HIV is a tough one because if you're going and you have stockouts, so the medicine isn't there, or you have long lines, so people miss some doses. If they miss even 20% of their doses, it's as though they're not taking medicine at all. So to get the benefit, you need pretty high compliance. And so we're trying to rise above the noise level, the polarization, and say, whether it's humanitarian instinct, religious moral beliefs, beliefs in security in the world, belief, that the U.S., we want people to think of us as being helpful, and that these are very small percentage, way less than 1% of the budget. So we're trying to get that word out.
Yeah.
And we need not just the U.S., we need the U.K. that's got Brexit. We've got France with yellow vests. We've got Germany where, Merkel's sort of moving along, and the whole immigration thing is created a lot of controversy. And so every country that we're going to, there's a little bit of question about, gosh, have we been doing the right things?
Right. And to that point about the inward-looking parochial protectionism, the cries of country first, I think that's a really important point in the current political context and rhetoric, because I think it can be challenging for the everyman to fathom how putting funding toward fighting an HIV outbreak half a world away could ever have ripple effects that could impact his own way of life for the better. So I wonder how you grapple with and appreciate this idea of a shared humanity. Why is all of our well-being connected?
Well, for me, the idea of innovation, for those most in need, is what I, saw such an opportunity for as I shifted away from my full-time work at Microsoft. Making that case is easiest if people can go and see it on the ground. Now that's not practical. We can't take all the U.S. voters and have them go, see malaria bed nets, see HIV medicine at work. The more people we can get over there and have them come back and bear witness that, yes, this is real, it touched me, the better. And then, there's additional arguments about the military, including General Mattis saying this helps with stability in these countries. And the U.S. spends 20 times as much on our defense budget as our aid budget. We have a particularly large defense budget. I mean, by far the biggest in the world. Our aid budget is in absolute slightly bigger than Germany's, but only about 20% bigger. So as a percentage of, say, their economy, they're like 3 times what we are. The image that should everybody get HIV medicine, or should it be a death sentence if you're born in the wrong country, that definitely has some appeal. The idea of helping these countries lift themselves up so that they don't need aid in the future, which in many Asia countries like Vietnam or Indonesia or India now they're getting their income up, so they're graduating, so they just use their own resources, and we can take our aid dollars and have more on the really tough countries, which some of the parts of Africa will be very, very tough. We're always looking for creative ways to bring this message home and to make sure that the cynicism, that we have enough facts to overcome that. And, I think we'll succeed. I will say the Congress, when the president proposed cutting this aid money pretty substantially, which would have led to more than 5 million additional deaths from HIV, it was very bipartisan. It wasn't even a close thing. The Republicans said, no, and the Democrats, that we don't stand for, cutting these things. We are committed to see the HIV crisis through until we can get rid of it.
In terms of your global health investment, you've put a lot of support behind 3 institutions in particular: the Global Fund, Gavi, as you mentioned, and the Vaccine Alliance. And I wonder, what kind of is the rubric or criteria that you use to decide what to fund in global health?
Well, our basic criteria is that we can save lives for less than $1,000 per life saved. And so it's got to be something that's amazingly effective.
Gotcha.
When we first came into it, we thought we'd mostly fund the R&D side where you're creating a new tool. And so we thought, this is very exciting. We can help create a malaria vaccine, a TB vaccine, an HIV vaccine, which the world does not yet have. Then we saw that there were actually vaccines that had already been invented that weren't getting out to the the kids who needed them. And so until that delivery problem was addressed, the motivation to create new ones was pretty limited. And so there was a diarrheal vaccine called rotavirus and a pneumonia vaccine called pneumococcus. And that's where Gavi came in and got a super cheap price and then was able to buy on behalf of the poor countries. And now we have quite good coverage, even in very tough places, for those two new vaccines. And that's the main reason why childhood deaths, which back in 1990 were 12 million a year, now are under 6 million a year. And so it's, pretty successful. And it's clear that whenever we invent new vaccines, then Gavi will be there to negotiate a sort of cost-based price and get them out. And so that's, meant that all that upstream R&D work we're doing will pay off in a big way. We won't have to wait decades for it to get delivered.
Very relatedly, you wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal earlier this year talking about your work in global health investment, and you called it the best investment you ever made. And you illustrated kind of the detrimental domino effect of pulling foreign aid from these programs. And you cited in particular the World Health Organization's Global Malaria Eradication Program, which was astonishingly effective when the U.S. was providing funding for it. But when that budget was cut, we saw malaria epidemics crop up around the world. What are you most worried about in terms of what could happen today if we cut funding to these three global health programs in particular?
The clearest is HIV, where because we don't have a cure, unlike TB or malaria, when you take the drugs, you get cured. Now, you can get reinfected, but you are completely healthy again. With HIV, the drugs, all they're doing is keeping it from multiplying in a way that will allow diseases to come and kill you. And so if you stop taking the medicines, it's a death sentence.
Right.
And that one, once you get in and you're helping people get those drugs, until we have some type of cure construct, morally, you're pretty, it's pretty clear that you should maintain that. And, it's not like you can say, okay, the U.S. economy is in such bad shape that, we can't afford that $100 to buy that medicine, or that, buying another tank will do more good per dollar than that does. The same story is also true of the other diseases. For example, the bed nets that we got out that let us cut the malarial deaths from 1 million a year down to 500,000. Unfortunately now, the mosquitoes have evolved to resist the particular pesticide called pyrethroid that's on those nets. And so we need to get a new generation of nets out there. And so that those current nets are not working. And so for the last 2 years, malaria cases and deaths have actually been flat, in a few countries slightly up. So if you stand still, the disease will get out ahead of you and your old tools won't work anymore.
And that was part one of my interview with Bill Gates, co-founder of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, discussing the contents of the 2019 annual letter penned by himself and Melinda Gates. Be sure to check out www.gatesletter.com to read the letter in full. Again, that's www.gatesletter.com. You have been listening to The Hannah Hundel Show, brought to you from the studios of Harvard Radio Broadcasting. I'm your host, Hannah Hundel, and I thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next week.